Hello and welcome to Dialogue. I'm Zoya in Beijing. On May the 20th, Ms. Tsai Ing-wen from the Democratic People's Progressive Party was sworn in as the first female leader of Taiwan. In her inaugural speech, she focused on domestic issues in Taiwan and promised to maintain peace and stability in cross-strait relations. However, Ms. Tsai was ambiguous on one fundamental issue. That is the nature of cross relations and how she will develop cross-strait relations. And what are the other challenges that she might face as the leader of Taiwan? To talk about this, we are joined in the studio by Mr. Gao Zhikai from a current affairs commentator, and also Professor Huo Deming from Peking University. And later on, Mr. You Ping-chun, an associate professor from the Department of Public Administration and Policy at National Taipei University, will also join our discussions. But before we get started, let's take a look at this.
The Taiwan Affairs Authority described remarks by Tsai on relations across the straits as an incomplete answer sheet. The head of the authority said in a statement that Tsai was ambiguous on the fundamental issue of the nature of cross-straits relations in her inauguration address. It also said that there was no explicit recognition of the 1992 consensus and its core implications, and no proposal of concrete ways to ensure the peaceful and stable development of cross-straits relations. The statement said the Chinese mainland remains as determined as ever and has even greater capability to uphold national sovereignty and territorial integrity. It warned that should Taiwan independence be attempted, there would be no peace and stability across the Taiwan Straits, and the Chinese mainland will resolutely forestall any separatist action or attempt for Taiwan independence of any form.
And Ms. Tsai Ing-wen, in her inaugural speech, she spent a lot of time on domestic issues, economy, social policies, but very little time on cross-straits relations. That seems to spell how she will carry out his policies in Taiwan. What do you think will define her tenure as Taiwan leader?
I listened very carefully to Ms. Tsai Ing-wen's inaugural speech yesterday. I personally found the speech more or less balanced. You know, she has a track record of advocating for Taiwan independence, but in her inaugural speech yesterday, there was no mentioning at all of Taiwan independence or one China, one Taiwan. She actually referred to Chinese mainland as the other side of the strait. Ambiguous, of course, but it's not as extreme as she was very much accustomed to do that. Therefore, I think while the Chinese mainland government is not very happy about Tsai Ing-wen's speech overall, especially her not mentioning the 1992 consensus or mentioning that the two sides of the Taiwan Strait belong to one China, I think we need to listen to what she had to say, but also watch what she had to walk upon and do in the coming weeks and months and years. And I would say that she is also faced with the ideological dilemma, because if she really cares about the fundamental interest of the people in Taiwan, she cannot repeat what she is so good at saying about Taiwan independence, because once she starts to talk about that, that's a dead end for Taiwan, and it will put all the good works that have been done over the years in mainland China-Taiwan relations to a complete stop.
It is an interesting point, Mr. Hall, because Tsai Ing-wen was actually the architect of the two-state policy back in the 1990s. So it seems that she has made progress, not even mentioning Taiwan independence. And she said that in 1992, both sides of the Taiwan Strait representatives met and have some kind of agreement. She didn't elaborate on what was agreed upon.
It shows how how practical she is, and she was, and she is a practical person. And I looked through his speech. I actually listened to the entire speech. 85 to 90% is on domestic issues, which is economics, social issues, welfares, health cares, and so on and so forth. And only until the very last section, which is like, I thought it's going to the end of the speech, and then it pops up, which is we consider to be the practical issue for the rest of the world. So, i.e., it enlightens me that, hey, maybe this is what really happens in Taiwan. Practically, the economics is really, really bad.
But still, there is a lot of ambiguity on her definition of cross-strait relations, and Beijing would not be happy if she continues to be so ambiguous about the nature of cross-strait relations.
Yes, indeed. However, if we look at the other alternatives, for example, Ms. Tsai Ing-wen yesterday could have come up with a declaration of Taiwan independence. That would really cause war or confrontation to
And
happen
do you think
immediately.
she will do that?
No, I don't think so. But I think from Chinese mainland's perspective, we should be prepared against several possibilities. I would say yesterday, the worst case scenario did not happen. That's actually a positive thing. And it's not realistic to expect that Tsai Ing-wen, having a track record of advocating for Taiwan independence, would, in her inaugural speech yesterday, come up with a complete support for one China, and Taiwan is part of China, and Taiwan will, let's say, start the negotiation with mainland China to put an end to the civil war and to become part of the People's Republic of China. That would be the best case scenario for mainland Chinese government and for people here, like we are here in China. But then, that's also not realistic. Therefore, I think, while we are not completely happy with what she said yesterday, we should say on and off, more or less, it's a more balanced speech.
So this is
we should give her more
this
time.
is also your reading. This is better than we expected about her on cross-strait relations.
Well, we
wording.
expect she will not mention the so-called 4 words.
No.
But other than that, she has accomplished, in essence, also in practicalities, she has almost accomplished our expectations.
But considering the fact she has been also facing pressure within her own
definitely,
party,
yes.
which is more pro-independence diehards for independence of Taiwan, right? So isn't that easy?
You just talk to people under the age of 30s. I believe, that's my personal experience, I think there are probably more than 50% of young people which is more in favor of the other side.
Okay, we have our Taiwan guest on the line, Mr. Yu Ping Chen, Associate Professor of National Taipei University. Mr. Chen, how did Taiwan media respond to what Mr. Tsai Ing-wen said at her inauguration, especially on her mentioning of cross-race relations?
Well, first of all, it was a very nicely written speech with very carefully crafted wordings. And I have to say, looking at the media response today, there is a mixed bag of responses from across the political spectrum. You can expect, naturally, from DPP supporters or pro-DPP media people, they have very positive opinions about her speech, or in fact, most pro-independence or pro-DPP media and commentators endorse her positions regarding the cross-strait relations. And naturally, there were wide applause about her policy reform regarding internal issues. And many people in the DPP camp pointed to her good faith or her political gestures in trying to pass out an olive branch. However, I have to say there are also many critics, and especially in the Pan-Blue camp, that would emphasize she did not clearly accept the 1992 consensus or indirectly express her willingness to accept that the two sides of the Taiwan Strait belong to one country or belong to one China.
So that's our key
In
question.
other words,
Her
there is
ambiguity
still
will
a very
probably
clear lack of
influence her
political
future
trust.
policies towards the mainland. Are the Taiwan people concerned about how Tsai Ing-wen will handle cross-strait relations? This kind of ambiguity?
Well, if you look at the most recent public opinion surveys, you don't really sense people's urgent need for a clear position on cross-strait relations because, for example, right in front of me, a May 17th survey indicated that Taiwanese are mostly concerned about First of all, economic development, which takes up 56.6% of the survey respondents. And then 24.7% of people said they care about employment opportunities, and the other 18% cares about education, and then comes pension fund reform. The final category, which catches about 16% of people, care more about cross-strait relationship. In other words, the past 8 years stable and peaceful development across the Taiwan Straits have created a paradoxical situation. In other words, when cross-strait relationship actually is the very foundation of what we have today, becomes the least urgent issue for the citizens in Taiwan.
But what if the economic relations between Taiwan and the mainland changed and Taiwan suffered because of its economic reliance on the mainland? Will Taiwan people feel the same about its cross-strait relations?
Oh, I would agree with you, because most people would say Tsai Ing-wen does not enjoy a honeymoon period. In other words, in less than a couple of years, I would say a year or so, people in Taiwan are going to feel the difference between Ma Ying-jeou's administration and Tsai Ing-wen's administration. In other words, if Tsai Ing-wen does not show her real, genuine good faith in accepting the core principle of the 1992 consensus, you're going to see either a cooling down of trade relations between mainland China and Taiwan, or even a deterioration of the trade links between the two sides. And by that time, people in Taiwan will certainly very, very keenly feel the difference.
I also want to ask the question about KMT. With outgoing Taiwan leader Ma Ying-jeou's administration over, why did a KMT government fail to live up to the expectation of Taiwan people, although Mr. Ma has been championing or call it closer ties with the mainland?
Well, I have to say that Ma Ying-jeou did have a very nicely formulated cross-strait policy. However, you can notice that in the first term of Ma Ying-jeou's administration, well, he scored pretty well in terms of the public opinion surveys. You can get usually around 60% or even high up to 70% of the Taiwanese citizens feeling comfortable with Ma Ying-jeou's cross-strait policy. However, by his second term, you're beginning to see doubts and worries about cross-strait development. In other words, when you see increasing economic interdependence or increased trade between the two sides, Ma Ying-jeou administration failed to realize the peace dividends that people are supposed to receive. In other words, the middle class, the lower middle class, the working class, and the farmers, they all feel alienated because of the inequitable income distribution. They don't get the benefits out of this cross-strait interaction. In fact, a lot of people, and including the media commentators, would argue that probably the large business groups or the vested interests receive most of the peace dividends or the bonus. And then we have to say that by his second term of Ma Ying-jeou's administration, the lack of effective policy communication, or their insufficient public disclosure, or their inability to involve public participation in cross-strait policy process, all these factors lead to doubts and anxieties among the general public, which means that people fear more about the coming uncertainty or insecurity, which in fact I have to say is a mistaken conception, and a lot of it has to do with DPP's propaganda. And I have to admit that DPP is very good at public communication process, and they really know how to distort the realities.
But still, the KMT failed in the election in January. That's a major reason why it happened. Thank you very much, Mr. Chen, for your analysis from Taiwan. You're watching Dialogue. We're talking about cross-strait relations after the inauguration of new Taiwan leader. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We're talking about cross-strait relations after the inauguration of new Taiwan leader. As Mr. Chen mentioned, Mr. Ma and his administration failed in some areas. That's why a lot of people in Taiwan are not satisfied with the status quo. Many young people are out of jobs. Do you think it is a fair judgment that the economic and social policies of Mr. Ma Ying-jeou is not working? That's why he was voted out.
Well, I would say in a democracy like in Taiwan, the fundamental question is where is the beef, or where is the better beef? And Ma Ying-jeou has been relatively indecisive in several major initiatives, including on the closer economic cooperation with mainland in one of the major episodes in modern Taiwanese politics. And I would say that based on my personal trip to Taiwan in November last year, I really have the feeling that the people in Taiwan, probably with a few exceptions of some die-hard, pro-independent people, most of the people care about their living standards, about their livelihood, their education,
yes,
their daily life, for example. Few people in Taiwan really want to go to a war with mainland China. Why? This will really destroy the fundamental raison d'etre of Taiwan. Therefore, I think economics will be the key issue.
But why didn't closer economic relations between Taiwan and mainland bring more benefits to people in Taiwan?
Taiwan in itself is at a crossroads, mainly because other economies around Taiwan are transforming themselves, are fast developing, and if Taiwan does not come up with a new paradigm of doing business, it will be left behind. Its competitive strengths are now becoming dimmer and dimmer.
So the question is, will Tsai Ing-wen come up with a plan to change the paradigm and reinvigorate Taiwan economy?
Allow me to decipher your first question. In economics, especially in this globalization world, physical capital, financial capital moves faster than human capital, and in particular, labor. So what we find in this new globalization internet world, that is always the money moves to where it profits most, and where the people are the ones that left behind. That would happen to everywhere in the world, not only Taiwan.
So it's unavoidable in Taiwan to have money go to the mainland.
It's just a worldwide phenomenon. And think about Taiwan as such a close province to mainland China, and this is the most closest thing they can find with their capital if there's profit opportunities. So if I'm a capitalist, if I own some, even a little bit of money, I would probably choose to buy stocks or real estate, invest. I'm thinking about the return.
Tsai Ing-wen said she wants to plan policies to attract those Taiwan investors back home.
Any policy would have to make it more profitable or make it more rational for people to invest in Taiwan.
So it will fall empty, according to your prediction.
It's a very, very difficult, as in this globalization
What
process.
about going south policy? Ms. Tsai Ing-wen said that Taiwan should win itself off its reliance
Taiwan
on mainland
has tried
economy.
before. 20 years ago, 15 years ago, Li Denghui has espoused the southern direction, economics as well as all kinds of links. It doesn't work.
Well, I would say Tsai Ing-wen's going south policy is highly misguided, because the other side of the same coin, as she proposed, is to reduce or minimize the dependence on the mainland Chinese market. That will not work, mainly because all the ASEAN countries have diplomatic relations with mainland China, with the People's Republic of China, and Taiwanese involvement in any of these ASEAN countries is some meaningful involvement, but you cannot expect that they will be maximized in the coming coming years, which will be at cost to ASEAN countries' economic relations with China. China and ASEAN countries have a free trade agreement, and they are further strengthening the relations. And I think, to cause a diversion of resources, capital, technologies, R&D, facilities, etc., from Taiwan and mainland China going down south to ASEAN countries will be a dead end for Taiwan. It will take years.
It doesn't make economic sense.
It doesn't make economic sense.
It only makes political sense, right?
Economically, China or mainland China is really the closest tie to Taiwan, culturally, whatever you want to call it. So. Yeah. As with comparative advantage endowed in every Taiwan citizen or investors. Well,
another issue that Tsai Ing-wen mentioned is TPP. She wants Taiwan to join TPP so that it will be part of a large trade framework, which bring more opportunities to Taiwan. But the problem is TPP might be a dead end after a new U.S. administration is sworn in, and also is not part of the negotiation yet.
Well, TPP, as far as I see it now, it's an ongoing process, and you just said, it's not the very end, or it's not even at the stage of Japan and Korea and others are all in that party. So it's still an ongoing debate. Well, I shouldn't say debate, it's an ongoing process, and God knows where that's going to lead to.
Yeah. No, TPP itself is very slow. I don't think 2016 will see the ratification of TPP by any major countries within the TPP framework. And going forward, once the United States has a new president, either Mr. Trump or
the trade policy will
Hillary
change,
Clinton,
definitely.
They probably will be opposing TPP. So I think betting.
Actually, both of them opposed.
Exactly.
Or doesn't agree.
Exactly. Betting Taiwan's economic future on TPP may again be a very misguided policy.
The mainland has been strengthening economic links and trade policies with Taiwan because we presume there is an agreement on the nature of cross-strait relations, that is one China. If Ms. Tsai Ing-wen continued to be ambiguous or didn't elaborate on this nature of cross relations, will China corner Taiwan? Will China punish Taiwan economically?
Well, philosophically, on this second day after Tsai Ing-wen's inauguration as the local leader in Taiwan, I would still try to give her some benefit of doubt. I would actually urge her to exercise her wisdom, her judgment, and her vision and courage to really be a good leader for the people in Taiwan. And if she really wants to deliver economic benefits for the people in Taiwan, she cannot undermine the cross-strait relations. She cannot go in the wrong direction of advocating for Taiwan independence. She cannot just talk the talk about one China, but walk the walk about two China.
But what is the red flag from Taiwan that the mainland will see as a warning sign that we should punish Taiwan, or at least add more pressure on Taiwan?
Tsai Ing-wen is a very practical person. I personally know that. And the direction she's heading for is the constitutional approach of one China principle, which is the constitution that she is always referring to, and which is one China principle that we are champion, or the mainland Chinese, or we would like to see. So theoretically speaking, there's really no disagreement. Well, what can I say when you say about the red flag?
Yes.
Constitutional approach of one China principle. I think that will be the best solution for everybody.
What kind of negotiation mechanism will be looking like in her administration? Will she keep all the mechanism in place with the mainland?
I would say there can be several scenarios. One scenario, which is the most dangerous and the worst case scenario, is that Tsai Ing-wen will, now that she is in the presidency, soon start a process which will lead to eventually, as she would expect, a de facto independence of Taiwan. If that's the option that she will follow, mainland China will rise up and use whatever measures available to stop that process. That's the worst case scenario. The best case scenario is that now that the responsibilities are on her shoulder, she's pragmatic, she's realistic, she cares about the fundamental interests of the people in Taiwan, so she would disregard whatever platform she had been standing upon for decades and really try to steer the course of events in Taiwan in such a way that people in Taiwan will benefit. And if she really cares about the fundamental interests of people in Taiwan, she cannot disregard the fact that there is one China. That's the reality. That reality will exist regardless of what she thinks about.
She might be a reasonable and moderate leader, but the problem is she has to say it out loud when she is talking to mainland representative what kind of relations this is before anything happens, right?
Well, she is trying to avoid that.
But if she can't avoid it all the time.
If every time we say one China principle and said, yes, I agree with that, but constitutional approach of one China principle, which is just
there are a lot of talks waiting to happen. Service trade negotiations,
yes.
A lot of things. Yes. But that kind of negotiation can only happen, Taiwan also joining WHO as an observer, those kind of things.
That would become a world perception as which side is more rational, whether it's the one China principle or the constitutional approach of one China principle. I think what Tsai Ing-wen is really focusing on, remember that, she's not only saying about the constitutional approach, and constitution, which is a big daddy of everybody, but all the legal matters, the very tiny bit of legalities, which is involved in everyday life in China's citizens, in Taiwanese citizens, that is what I'm really worrying about. If I'm espousing for the Taiwan autonomy's independence, I will try to find every little things, all kind of legality things, trying to espouse that principle.
Another thing is that there is a populist sentiment and movement in Taiwan that may be worrying to mainland leaders. The Taiwan people now, especially young people, do not care about the politics and political status of Taiwan. What can mainland do to win the hearts and minds of the people, especially the young?
Yeah, I think as far as mainland China is concerned, there are several things which mainland China has to do. One is to stand firm on this one China policy and never budge away from this policy. Secondly, give Tsai Ing-wen a little bit of benefit of doubt so that she can, navigate in the first weeks and months of her presidency and
but
try
how long
to
do you
really
think that will be? In a matter of months or years?
Try to really sober up. I think, the first several months will be crucial because once she has the weight of the presidency on her shoulder, I hope she will become more realistic and more pragmatic. I hope she will come up with a better alternative. And I hope she will realize that the southward drive for Taiwan economic activities will hit a brick wall, will be a dead end. She will need to come back with re-engaging with mainland China. That's the only thing.
Mr. Ho, your advice for mainland decision makers?
Just think about what we should do to win the heart of young people of Hong Kong. If we can find a solution to that, we can resolve the same issue for Taiwan.
And that won't be easy.
Well, we can think about it, and I think there are several ways to do that.
Okay, we're running out of time. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
And Mr. Ho.
Thank you.
And you've been watching Dialogue here on CCTV News. Thanks for joining us. Goodbye for now.